Welcome everybody to my first live stream. I have no idea what I'm doing, and I know very little about what I'm doing, I guess. But I have my coffee, well, actually my tea, and I have conversation, and I have some teaching and some stories today. Instead of doing a story on an intimate partner homicide event that happened, we're going to actually look at a couple of different recent police reports on strangulation. Hi, Donna. Yay. I'm so glad to see you. I don't think I've heard from you in a little while. Since this is my first live stream, I don't have like the cool tools yet. If we end up liking doing this once a month or maybe even more frequently, then I'll invest in doing some of the cool things so that I can screen share and stuff, but I just printed off for today. But I was looking through criminal reports and I was noticing how many times there were domestic assaults with strangulation in particular. So I went back and printed off just from December 21st through yesterday. And I figured I'd just work backwards. So on January 24th of this year at 12:45 a.m., officers were dispatched regarding a domestic disturbance. And it's really interesting to me. I'm sure it depends on the officer. Some of them actually document a lot, and others you will see document almost nothing, which is extremely not helpful. Officers contacted Metcalf and Doyle, who live together and have a child in common. The investigation revealed that Metcalf and Doyle were involved in an altercation where Metcalf grabbed Doyle by her neck, causing her normal breathing to be impeded by the pressure of Metcalf grabbing her neck. She also had injuries consistent with strangulation. Also, Metcalf threatened Doyle that if he was going to get a gun and kill her, which caused terror in Doyle that Metcalf was going to follow through due to the fact that Metcalf has access to guns. Doyle also received a small scratch to her face during the altercation. This altercation occurred while Doyle was holding their 3-month-old child. Metcalf was arrested for strangulation, terroristic threats, domestic assault in the 3rd degree, and negligent child abuse. I find it really entertaining in a dumb kind of way that they have to say things like causing her normal breathing to be impeded and causing terror, because who's not going to have terror caused to them if somebody that you know can kill you and obviously was just trying to is threatening to kill you. To me, that seems really obvious, but for legal purposes, they have to do that. So you have all of this information. And then the next one on January 10th says, Ada advised that she was assaulted and strangled by an intimate partner, which resulted in injuries. Case is open. That's it. How would that be helpful for building any kind of a case for Ada at all? I don't know. This is news media reports that they put out daily, so I don't know if there are things that they don't say for the media that they are saying, that they keep within, especially where it says case is open. And other times they'll say what specifically they're being charged with. So I don't know if while the case is open, they can't share more. January 7th at 11:21 at night, officers responded for the report of a disturbance. It was advised that Garcia had thrown his girlfriend to the ground several times. It was said that while she was on the ground, he struck her in the face, used one hand to strangle her to the point where she could not breathe, and he was arrested for domestic assault, 3rd degree, and strangulation. And I think it's interesting to note, too, when these things happen, because nighttime seems to be worse. It's not always the case, but couples fight more at night, it seems like. So the 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock in the morning range is super common. On December 27th at 11:10 p.m., they responded to a reported domestic disturbance. On scene, contact was made with Rachel. Rachel had visible red abrasions on her neck and a bloody nose. Rachel advised that her boyfriend and intimate partner Melvin had just struck her across the face with an open hand, causing physical pain and her nose to bleed. Rachel also reported that Melvin had wrapped his hands around her neck, which impeded her breathing during the altercation. Lastly, Rachel advised that she was unable to leave the apartment while officers were knocking at the door because Melvin was physically restraining her. Melvin was arrested for strangulation, domestic assault 3rd degree, with prior and false imprisonment in the 1st degree. I got 2 more. On December 23rd, Shelby reported that her boyfriend Dylan choked her with his hands. Shelby had signs of injury on her neck caused by Dylan. Dylan admitted that they were fighting in their bathroom. When Dylan was placed under arrest, a glass pipe was found in his coat. Dylan and Shelby have been in a relationship for years and have a child. Dylan was arrested for domestic assault, strangulation, and possession of drug paraphernalia. The reason that I wanted to include these today is that we always talk about the stories after the women have been murdered. I mean, there's tons of those, and then there's so many more that are on their way there that may or may not know that they're on their way there, or may or may not reach out for help when they're on their way there. And I would like to be able to get to them. I would like to be able to tell them, strangulation is dangerous, super dangerous. It's like the last step before death. Whether they die from strangulation or they die from something else, they will die at the hands of the person that is willing to strangle them. It's extremely serious. And I don't want these women or men to die, but I'm choosing women in these cases. On December 21st, officers responded to a report of a domestic disturbance. Female reports Miguel assaulted her by striking her numerous times in the face and body, biting her, and strangled her to cause her to be unable to breathe. Numerous visible injuries were observed on the female. The female and Miguel have a child in common. The child was present during the assault. Miguel took the child and left prior to officers' arrival. Miguel was located and a traffic stop was attempted. He fled from officers while running a traffic light, traveling at speeds in excess of 87 miles an hour, and crossing into oncoming traffic. Officers discontinued the pursuit of the vehicle. Miguel was located by State Patrol after being involved in an accident. No surprise there. Miguel used the child as a shield, did not listen to officers' commands to show his hands, and was observed not wearing a seatbelt. The child was also observed to be not in proper restraint system, which, you can understand when they're in the middle of fleeing a crime that they're not going to take the time to properly buckle this child in, that they're totally okay with using as a human shield later. Miguel's taking of the child knowingly and intentionally exposed the child to the risk of serious bodily injury. A record check of Miguel showed a prior conviction for domestic assault and no operator's license. Miguel has also been served with a protection order from this particular female. He was located and arrested by State Patrol. Miguel is being referred for kidnapping, strangulation, third-degree domestic assault with a prior, false imprisonment, first-degree, child abuse, willful flight to avoid protection order violation, obstruction, no operator's license, no seatbelt, and child restraint violation. That case brings to mind a couple of different things, a lot of different things, but one of them being that just the person being abused is not the only person in harm's way. Whether that child had been abused before that time or not, they were always in danger. If this person was willing to abuse their significant other, they're willing to hurt other people, particularly children. But then you have people that go in and shoot their significant other, and they shoot whoever's with them or around them, depending on the situation. Or the guy recently that ran his wife over at the bank. He wasn't concerned about who else might have been hit when he killed his wife, when he ran her over with their car. They're not concerned with the safety of the people around them. So when I left my ex-husband, I didn't do it for me. I ended up doing it for my kids because I was in such a place where I couldn't do something like that for myself. I didn't feel like I was worthy or deserving of safety and love and things that are good, but my kids were. And so if that's what people need to take and run with to be able to get away, do it, because it's legitimate. And then another thing to consider as far as this case is concerned is, do you think that a protection order is going to be helpful with him? I do not, in any way. Dawn, I was agreeing with you that it works, protection orders work on somebody who's got something to lose. I agree. And that might be the deciding factor right there, more than anything else, because everything else could fall into that. Whether they want to save face with their family or their friends or work, or they've got some some criminal violation that's going to send them away to prison for 20 years or whatever, but whatever it is that's important to them that they have to lose. I think you're right. But I'm curious whether or not you think that anybody that is willing to go to the point of strangling would actually honor a protection order. So I picked out a couple of different articles, and I'm not going to read them all by any means, but in Psychology Today there was an article called "The Most Concerning Sign of Domestic Violence" by Dr. Joni Johnston, and in it she said there's one risk factor that stands above all others, which is strangulation. Batterers who strangle their victim are more likely to engage in other extreme acts of violence. And what she said that I found particularly interesting was there's a message in strangulation that says that there are no limits that he won't go to, and the odds are that he's willing to kill. Like, if somebody goes to that extent, that is so extreme that they're telling you effectively, I will kill you. I'm not concerned with anything else. WTHR 13 is a news outlet. They did an article that's called "Manual Strangulation is the Biggest Sign Domestic Abuse Will Turn Deadly," experts say. And this has a bunch of good information in it, in my opinion. According to the San Diego-based Training Institute on Strangulation Prevention, a woman who suffers a non-fatal strangulation incident with her intimate partner is 750 times more likely to be killed by that same person with a gun. This says with a gun. I could have sworn I've read before with a gun, so I might have to double check that because I've used that statistic before. But this is non-fatal strangulation. It's saying they're way, way, way more likely to die by this person if they've survived a strangulation before. And a lot of people do. 70% of victims who were strangled believed that they were going to lose their life during the strangulation. And indeed, death can occur in under 5 minutes. Loss of consciousness can occur in less than 10 seconds. When I was still with my ex-husband, before I left him for good, I stayed a couple of months after this for different reasons, but he pushed me through a thin wall and pinned me there. And I don't really know what his plan was from that point on, but one of his friends happened to be there, and he came over and was trying to talk him into letting me go. And he let me go and grabbed this guy, this friend of his, by the throat and choked him until he passed out. And that gave me the opportunity to get away and get out of the house and call the police. And it's scary. I didn't know if he was going to survive, and I didn't know if I was going to survive. So strangulation, it's scary. Also in this article, it says back in December of 2020, Beacon of Hope spokesman Jackie Bowman told 13 News the center's advocates saw more people facing some form of domestic violence since last year, which at this point I don't feel like anybody is surprised by. Maybe they are, but 2020, we're in lockdown, more domestic violence is happening. We've seen a remarkable increase, and not just in the number of calls that we get, but the complexity that we get. Requests for protection orders were up 148% since 2019. Incidents of stalking and harassment were up 66%, while domestic violence incidents where the victim was strangled by their abuser were up 212%. And that was kind of mind-blowing to me. But it makes sense because it's an easy way to control your victim, particularly when you have to be in close proximity, when you're stuck together. And then the third thing that I wanted to do was cover, this is from the Domestic Violence Hotline, which is an amazing resource, and I love them and I use them often. They say strangulation is a significant predictor for future lethal violence. If your partner has strangled you in the past, your risk of being killed by them is 10 times higher. So if you've survived a strangulation before, you are much more likely to die from them if they have strangled you in the past at any point. Strangulation is one of the most lethal forms of domestic violence. Unconsciousness may occur within seconds, death within minutes. And I wanted to share this because I didn't even realize this before doing this research for today. And this is not my first go around with strangulation, but I guess I missed this. It's possible to experience strangulation and show no signs or symptoms at first, which if you get a hold of law enforcement and say, hey, I've been strangled, then they're going to look for physical things. And of course, redness and bruising and stuff around your throat or your neck, that's significant. They can also be looking and should be looking at your eyes because the pupils change and the blood vessels in your eyes will burst from lack of oxygen. But it's possible that you can show no symptoms at first but die weeks later because of brain damage due to lack of oxygen or other internal injuries. So you can be strangled, survive it, feel like, okay, I made it through that was scary, whether or not I filed a police report, whatever, but we're going to move forward, and you can die without having any warning as a result of that strangulation. So for this reason, they strongly encourage you to document the abuse also because, when you're dealing with the crisis situations of abuse and the stress and trauma, then details get fuzzy anyway. And then if you add brain trauma onto that, that makes it even harder to remember all of the details and not have conflicting stories. So if you can document your abuse, it's strongly advised to do that. But you also need to do that in a way that is not going to put you in more danger. So if you're stuck in your home and you're not able to get out, that can be really difficult. If you are able to get out and you can keep that somewhere else, that would be my recommendation, depending on your situation. They also strongly recommend that you would see a doctor if your partner has strangled or choked you, so that you can screen for these other things that you may not be aware of is even a possibility. And we want you to stay alive. So, and then I just thought I'd go over, because strangulation is very serious, symptoms of strangulation. Sore throat is really common. Having a raspy voice is also a common thing that police can look for if they know to look for that. Because if your windpipe's been crushed, or if there's trauma that's been inflicted on this part, then your throat and your voice will be affected. Difficulty swallowing, neck pain, hoarseness, bruising on the neck or behind your ears, discoloration on your tongue, ringing in your ears, bloodshot eyes, dizziness, memory loss, drooling, nausea or vomiting, difficulty breathing, incontinence, a seizure, miscarriage, changes in mood or personality like agitation or aggression. That is common. That's typical of brain trauma. Also changes in sleep patterns, fainted or lost consciousness depending on the situation. And actually the incontinence, it used to be believed that people would pee themselves because they were afraid to death. Like they were so scared that they couldn't hold it in. And it has since been determined that actually that's when a person dies, then their muscles release and let go. And so it's natural when any human dies for them to pee and sometimes poop. That's normal. So what they have discovered is actually if you pee yourself when you've been strangled, you were just on the verge of death. It is not a fear response. It's actually a biological response that your body was letting go because it's that big of a deal. I think that people deal with strangulation a lot more commonly than is reported. One of the things that I read said 43% of attempted murders from domestic partners include strangulation, and 45% of completed murders by intimate partners involve strangulation. That's almost half. That's significant. We have all kinds of reasons for staying. We're talking ourselves into staying, but if you get to the point in your relationship where they're strangling you, you need to figure out how to get out.